Hello, folks. We're going to go ahead and get started with this webinar, just-in-time hands-on access to your data. If you're new to Satori, we're going to actually walk through a very quick standard product overview, and then jump into some of the items you see on the screen here, which include our built-in Slack integration so that your Slack users can request access to sensitive data and be granted that access. And then we're going to take a look at some interesting, a little bit more advanced integration ideas using the Satori Rest API. Throughout that process, in the next 20 to 25 minutes or so, we'll be looking at Satori's built-in auditing of any query that runs through the Satori platform. Is something that shows up as an audit event, as well as the Satori Access Manager, which is a powerful single view into all of the data access that you've configured across the corpus of your organization. Let's jump right in, and first things first, just take a look at the product proper. By doing that, we're going to sort of play make-believe here and start in the middle. You've been using Satori for a period of months. You have everything up and running, and you have disparate clients connecting to disparate data stores. So on the screen here, I've got Tableau connected to a Postgres database. And if you're looking closely, you can see that we're redacting sensitive information. This query is actually being run through Satori, and we know who the audience is. We know if single sign-on with Okta or Active Directory is enabled. We know what groups they're a part of, and so forth. Right next door, we have a second connection, a Snowflake database. And if you're looking closely at the URL, you can see it's not snowflakecomputing.com, but instead satoricyber.net. The same thing, we've got some redaction here. And finally, one tab over, we have another client tool called mode.com, which lets you connect to a variety of data stores. And again, we're running this against a Satori managed connection. So redaction occurs here. So using our sort of premise that we're sort of day in the life here, you're up and running, and one of your data stewards decides or has been told that there's going to be a masking change. We need to start changing the information and how it's masked. To prove that Satori operates in real time, I'm just going to make a couple of quick changes here. And I'll change all of these to the word webinar. And there we go. And I'll click save. And in a moment, what I'll do is go back and rerun those queries. This is the product. If you've never seen the Satori platform from an administrative or data steward or governance or compliance point of view, our customers come in and they configure data store connections, and then they configure the policies to manage access to that data in real time. And at runtime, Satori automatically identifies sensitive data across, again, the corpus of all of your data stores. And so that's using our data inventory features. And then we audit. So every query that's run is actually captured and stored so you can report on that. So let's go back here real quick and just refresh some of these. I'll refresh Tableau. I'll rerun my Snowflake query, and I'll go to mode and rerun that query. And you'll see that the word Acme has changed to the word webinar. This very nicely and simply proves that Satori is operating on queries that pass through our platform to disparate source data like Snowflake, SQL Server, and Postgres in this case in real time. So there's Tableau. What's better is back over in Satori, we've audited that information. So over here in the audit log, everybody that ran a query is being tracked and monitored. And this is incredibly important from a PII and sensitive data access point of view. So if you drill into one of these, I'll choose the SQL query that we ran in that tool called mode.com. We know who the audience was, what security policies were applied. And in fact, there was some masking and even row level filtering. That's another feature that Satori has support for. And what columns we chose to mask, and you can drill through and find out why. This is a great starting point as far as low-level auditing. This is very, hands on keyboard at the ground level. We have a different way of looking at your information, which is the opposite, using the Access Manager. This is kind of a 30,000-foot view of your information. So at a glance, a data steward or a CISO or somebody that's in charge of all of your data can come to the Access Manager page and see what percentage all of my traffic is being governed by Satori. And the governed definition is that a query was run against a Satori managed connection, and we applied a security policy. In some cases, we may not apply a security policy if that's how you have things configured. And that's what that 14% missing is. The other thing you see on the screen here is at a glance, you can come in and drill into groups that have access to certain secured information. So I can click on this row, and this page here will update. It's telling me that in the last 30 days, there were about 800 queries against these different data sets, and these are the policies that were applied. So that's just a quick 4 or 5 minute overview of how Satori works. The purpose of this webinar is to sort of walk through some examples about instant access. How does your audience, how do your data consumers, your analysts, your data scientists request access to sensitive data? And what does that management process look like? So one of the first things we're going to point out is that Satori has built-in support for Slack integration. If you head over to satoricyber.com/docs, one of the integration choices here is Slack. It's very easy to add it in. To demonstrate it, we went ahead and signed up for a fictitious Slack account. It's the Satori 2022 demo workspace. So here's Slack. And also, I just want to point out that Satori includes a consumer data portal. So this would be for your audience, your analysts. They can come to this landing page and see what they've been granted access to, as well as what other data sets are available that they can request access to. What we're going to do right now is actually run this and request access on some secured data called HR data. So I'll go back to Slack, and I will just type in my handy Satori command here. I'll say Satori Access, and this will bring up, excuse me. This will bring up a window here that lets me pick my data sets. I'll go ahead and choose the HR data, and I'll choose what level of access do I want. If I'm just doing some analytics, maybe it's read only. If I'm going to be editing or modifying data, but I still want Satori to control it, I might choose read write. For now, I'll just keep it simple. Access, please. And I'll click request access. So that will now be pending. And this is because you have total control over how you set this up. Let's show you what I mean by that. The data steward that's in charge of a security data set, that's a Satori construct for HR data. And look at HR data. It contains all of these disparate, unrelated database vendors. That data steward will receive an email that there's a pending request. Now on this screen, the user access rule screen, you can actually set it up so certain teams automatically get their request approved. They still have to request, which is valuable for compliance and auditing and reporting purposes. But anybody in the logistics Okta group or the HR team, Azure Active Directory group would request and automatically get granted. This user, however, wasn't a part of those groups, and so they show up as a manual pending request. Now the data steward can come in and say, okay, they want read-only access, but we don't want it to never expire. We'd like it to just, stop working after 30 days. And let's go ahead and enforce either the default security policies, which are listed up here, or we can be very specific and give them a particular one-off policy. Satori security policies are covered in our docs, and there's other webinars where you can learn how to set up the nuts and bolts of it. It's very easy to do as far as creating masking rules and row-level filtering and that kind of thing. So here I'll just choose the HR policy and click approve. And now that user will show up here in the access rules page at the top. There they are, their 30-day expiration is in effect, and the data steward doesn't have to worry about this again. Their work is done. They'll know after 30 days the end user will no longer have access. Back in Slack, that end user has received an alert saying access to HR data is approved, and they can click get credentials, and this will again take them to the data portal page where they have a few different things on the screen here. Very important, Satori, in addition to all of the other features we have about securing your data, selecting, heterogeneous data stores to be managed in a unified manner, the auditing, the access manager, and the visibility. We also manage data store credentials. So there is no database user called Satori 2022 demo in Postgres or in Azure or in any of those other data stores that we've gained access to. It's managed by Satori, and at runtime, we identify your audience, we know who they are, and we let them use these ephemeral usernames and passwords as if they were true database users. The folks out there that are DBAs and data engineers love this feature because they no longer have to manage credentials in multiple disparate data sources. So that's the experience from Slack. And then, this person would copy their information. And again, they'd go back to mode. And in fact, or they'd go back to Snowflake or Tableau and use those credentials, and life would be good. And the rest of the product would work as expected. By the way, if anybody has questions, use our Q&A feature. Happy to answer those as we go through here. So that is just a quick overview of our Slack integration. And by the way, all of those, just to stress again, all of that work we just did shows up in the audit log. The access request itself will show up in the access manager. So if we go back to the access manager and look at the access history, this is a very valuable page from compliance. At a few moments ago, I requested access, and it was granted. And this will show revocations and expirations and that kind of thing. On the screen here, over time, I've had 195 data access requests. That's a really common or popular question that a CISO might ask. How many data access requests did we have in the last 12 months? And being able to, from a single page, see all of that information is really quite powerful. So let's see where we are here as far as timing and take a look at some other interesting features. I'll go back to our slides here. We looked at Slack integration. Now let's sort of step it up a little bit. Satori, you've seen now that Satori lets you manage data access processes, and we have built-in workflows for that. And your audience can use the Satori platform. Many of our customers, however, already have existing ticketing systems. And so the Satori REST API can really start to help here. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. Let's start with Jira. So I have a page open. We have signed up for, again, a fictitious Jira account, and I'm logged into it with a Jira account Gmail address. And the premise here is we've got data requests, Satori data request objects. They might be attached to support issues. They might be attached to whatever business process you've defined in Jira. And the premise that we've created here is that when certain Jira records move to the in progress status, that means the support person in question should be granted access to the related data stores. So in this case, we've got a Satori phrase here called secured data sources. That maps directly, let me get this out of the way, and let me go back to Satori here, to a security data set called secured data source. So the Jira user is requesting access to 12 totally disparate, heterogeneous underlying data stores. That's pretty cool. So here they are. They say how many hours of access do they need. Again, from a Jira point of view, this could be days, weeks. It's totally configurable. And right now, the workflow of this record is set to done. We've created this using a Jira webhook in such a way that anytime a record moves to in progress, the user will automatically be added to Satori. So I've done that. I said in progress. If I go back over here and click on the user access rules page, there it is, right at the top, 2 hours, and the clock is running. And this support person in this fictitious model can now do their work. And when they're done, they put a comment in, okay, looks good, or what have you. And again, from a Jira point of view, I can't stress this enough. You can have approvals in here. You can have your manager authorize it. There's really no limit to what you would do in Jira. But in this model, if you move it away from the in progress status, back to done or backlog or what have you, that triggers another webhook to the Satori REST API. And if I just refresh this page, that Jira demo user is going to disappear from the top of the list. And sure enough, it has. Really handy, concept there as far as setting up, integrations with external systems. Let's look at one other example. And for that, I actually have a Salesforce developer account. Let me pull it on the screen here. Similar concept. Salesforce has the ability in the setup area to create custom objects, create buttons and links. If you're familiar with Salesforce from a developer point of view, you can create what's known as Apex code and do all kinds of advanced things and have all kinds of advanced workflows. But the premise here, again, is we want a customer service rep or some kind of support technician to be able to go into one of their accounts and then request access. So there's a new object here called the Satori Access Request object. And I'll just create a new one. I'll say new request and which data set do I want? And again, this sort of is mapping to all of the security data sets that are back in Satori. This, again, I'll choose secured data sources. And this time I'll say I want 6 hours and I'll click save. We've built this with a big button on the screen here, but realistically in Salesforce, you would build this with a workflow or an approval, or, again, your manager has to approve this, but we wanted for demonstration purposes to make it really obvious what we're doing. So I now want to push this access to Satori, so I'll click that button. And we're again talking to the Satori REST API in real time and granting access. So it says, hey, your access was granted. In this case, from Salesforce, we actually get a response page and it says, here are all those data connections that you just requested access to. And those again map back over here to the definition tab, all of these underlying data stores. And sure enough, in the user access rules, there's now a SFDC account. We told it 6 hours, and so it's 6 hours. Pretty big deal to be able to set this up. Most importantly, that access history shows up here. Every time you grant or revoke or do things like that, it'll land in our own built-in auditing, as well as in the Access Manager page. So these are really valuable ways of integrating external software with Satori, again, using the REST API. It could be Jira, Salesforce, ServiceNow, a bespoke system built by your organization. Anybody that needs to integrate data security into their existing workflow and topology can definitely do that with the Satori REST API. At this point, we're almost at the conclusion of our webinar. I'm going to go sort of review what we've done so far today. Some of the things we looked at were our built-in Slack integration. We took a look at the Satori REST API, as well as, with some actual hands-on keyboard examples. And then throughout that process, we ran queries using those client tools that you saw, and those queries result in audit entries being available, and even the Access Manager view, the 30,000-foot view of the data access and security that you've configured across your entire system. One last thing I'll point out, this idea of using the Satori REST API to request inbound to Satori also works in the opposite direction. Our customers routinely want to run the audit data and send it somewhere else. They might want to capture certain events in Satori and then update those in a downstream seam, such as Datadog or OpenSearch by Amazon, or Elastic, the open version of OpenSearch. And so I'll just quickly show a few examples of what that outbound integration might look like. Here is, bring it on the screen, an example of Satori audit data having been sent to AWS OpenSearch. I'm just going to refresh this view, see if we get some latest data here. And it's reloading. And what this is showing you is information, this is a dashboard or a chart above and beyond something that Satori ships. And this is perfectly reasonable to say that you want to perform your own analytics on the Satori platform. This heat map, for example, is telling you a matrix of all of your data stores and what action was taken. So I could come in here and say, I'm interested in seeing all of the queries that were blocked against Postgres. I'm going to say, yes, let's apply those filters. And it'll drill down and show me exactly what that is. So anytime you have like a downstream seam like this, you can start to get really interesting analytics. Queries came in only a few minutes ago. So it's 11:20 Pacific time on the clock. This query came in 16 minutes ago during this presentation. And so just to show you that you can have these kind of integrations set up in real time. Pretty powerful stuff when you think about it. One other quick example here is this idea of sending alerts to a product like Datadog or Splunk. You don't necessarily want to send all of your Satori data to an external system. It's more interesting to think about what sensitive queries are being run across the corpus of my org. I'd like to catch those in near to real time. If somebody tries to collect a bunch of social security numbers or email addresses, I'd like to alert my external SIEM automatically. And that's what you're seeing on the screen here. There's some Satori events that have come in, again, using the Satori Rest API. So a lot of different ideas and options, very flexible in terms of how you might envision creating a unified security topology with the right tools, the right tools in the toolkit that would include the Satori platform. So with that, I'm going to quickly pause here and we'll see if there's any questions. Looks like we're question-free. That usually means we've done a very excellent job on giving this presentation. If you do have questions, I will send you one last place here. I'll close some of these tabs down. And that place is to go back out to Satori Cyber and just the root page. If you have any kind of follow-up, the best way to get technical answers to your technical questions is to go ahead and book a demo with us. We're happy to dive in, deep dive into all of the nuts and bolts about how the Satori platform works. And it's always our pleasure to give a presentation to somebody that's interested in securing their data and providing instant data access to all of their data stores using the Satori platform. And with that, folks, we're going to go ahead and do a quick stopping of the share. Thanks so much for coming to this webinar, and we do hope to see you again real soon.